Thank you for inviting me. My name is Paul Marsden. I'm with Unique Digital. I'm a media psychologist. And for those of you who know me, and those of you who don't, I'm a big fan of the power of suggestion. So I'm going to make the case today, in the next 20 minutes, that the power of suggestion is something that you guys can use as a practical tool to make your marketing more effective. Normally when you say power of suggestion, people start thinking, oh my God, he's going to hypnotize us. There's going to be sort of strange things like that. But I'm not. I'm not going to use hypnotism, but I'm going to use Marilyn Monroe, Sharon Stone, and Kurt Cobain. And I got a really simple message that using the power of suggestion is that there's been a lot about keyword marketing, harking back to decades gone by. But I think what we need to start thinking about is keywords rather than keywords. So that's the takeaway message. So you can now go to sleep if you're not interested. We talk about marketing, and one of the subsections today, and it's all about persuasion. That marketing is a game of persuasion. We need to communicate the value of what we're selling to somebody so we get them to behave in a different way. But there's more to marketing than, more to influence than persuasion. The psychology of influence is quite simple, and you can put stuff into 3 different buckets. You can influence by persuasion, which means using arguments, reasons to do stuff, either implicit arguments or explicit arguments, but it's the use of argument to actually influence. You can actually use coercion, put a gun to somebody's head, say do this or else, or actually use price incentives. You can use force, power, coercion. But you can also use suggestion, which is influence by example. And we all know that suggestion, power of suggestion works. And what's interesting is when you look at the research into media effects. Ooh, I've gone a bit Dalek-y, haven't I? I'm standing too close to this thing. If you look at the research into media effects and how media psychology works, you'll find most of the research out there looks at the power of suggestion. It's about how stuff that we see on screen then we copy, we imitate, it suggests to us behavior and we act accordingly. And of course in marketing, we know this, we can have all these marketing campaigns, buy brand A, brand B, but then you just kind of take what's the person next to you is having. The power of suggestion is powerful. And we know it's powerful through anecdote and through reality. When Sharon Stone in 1990s, Basic Instinct, there was a scene where that uses a Hermes white handkerchief or scarf, and it was used in a rather sexy scene, and it sold out the day after. It was product placement. Product placement works through the power of suggestion. Hermes didn't take out ad space, it was just the Hermes white scarf, and it worked. But if we take a step back and think, well, how does this power of suggestion work? Think about the last time you went to see a scary movie, a horror movie. When you come out of that movie, you then start interpreting squeaks and noises around you in a dark alley, walking back. You are spooked by it. The way we interpret stuff after the stuff we've seen is influenced by the stuff we've just seen. Our minds are primed. The agenda is set for how we interpret stuff. It's the experiences are framed in a way. So we then feel spooked. And interestingly, if you ever do feel spooked, one good thing to do, or if you want to become immune to ads, is to chew popcorn or chew something whilst you're in the movie, or if you're watching, if you don't want to get zapped by evil internet marketers and you don't want to get zapped by their ads, eat whilst you're on, when you have screen time. The very fact by chewing, simply chewing, it actually stops the power of suggestion, because it's the same mechanism that the power of suggestion works is when we vocalize something. We mirror what we're seeing, we vocalize it, and by chewing, we actually stop that pre-vocalization and we stop the power of suggestion. So if you ever want to be immune to ads, or if you're seeing a scary movie, eat popcorn, it works. Suggestion's really interesting. The more you sort of go into this, you realize it's kind of like a labyrinth. You're going down to, and there's interestingly that it's not simply the power of suggestion doesn't simply work through literal suggestion. It works metaphorically. So, for example, you've got a problem if your intimate other is taking a lot of hot baths. Because taking hot baths, people take hot baths, and it's actually strongly linked to feelings of social isolation and lack of social warmth. That first person feels isolated. Taking a hot bath, it creates the same feeling, and just through the power of suggestion, you feel loved again. So if you find yourself taking too many hot baths, realize that maybe you've got a problem, you need to get out a bit more, being socially isolated, or if your partner is taking a lot of hot baths, you've got a real problem. It gets darker, the power of suggestion. Does anybody here, it's difficult to see, does anybody know somebody or is themselves a little bit scared of flying? No, just one or two people. Interestingly, that the power of suggestion plays out in a quite a remarkable way. Your chances of dying in a plane crash in the week following a murder-suicide story in the news increases by 1,000%. So you find pretty much all card-carrying psychologists will not go near a plane after a big story of a murder-suicide, somebody who kills somebody else and then commits suicide themselves. What seems to be happening is that pilots will then take that as the power of suggestion, and they will then kill themselves and take the plane down with them. It's not that simply seeing a news story will actually make people commit suicide and take down a plane with them. But if you're in this approach avoidance conflict and likely to and considering suicide, simply seeing the social proof of other people doing it can tip you over and increases massively your likelihood of suicide. Same thing, similar things happen with in prize fights. Interestingly, after a prize fight, in a boxing prize fight, highly televised, if it's a white boxer against a black boxer or a coloured boxer, actually racial crime goes up in the week following. It seems to prime our minds to behave in a certain way. Casualty, the English soap opera. There was a paracetamol overdose that happened, that was portrayed, and in the weeks following, the paracetamol overdoses went up, admissions to hospitals went up by about 17%. It's the power of suggestion. We interpret things based on experiences we've had, immediate or otherwise. When Marilyn Monroe was found dead and allegedly committed suicide, the suicide rates jumped by about 12% in the weeks following. People interpret their own situations based on evidence they have around them, and they're open. We are suggestible creatures looking for a solution. Which has led me to some of my research working in suicide terrorism. And I actually looked at how terrorism was being portrayed in the media and wrote an article in The Psychologist saying, look, the way that terrorism is being reported, we're going to have there's going to be a suicide terrorism attack in the UK. I was unfortunate enough to post this, or to have this published, literally a month before the 7/7 bombings, and I had the Ministry of Defence on the phone the next day saying, come and talk to us about this. And I don't know whether I was a suspect or they wanted the explanation, but I went through this quite random meeting where I had to go and present my findings and theories about how power of suggestion works. But every time I said something, they sent me out saying I didn't have enough security clearance to actually hear what they had to say. So it was a really bizarre meeting. But the psychology is really quite basic, and there are formal guidelines that you can take from how to mitigate the power of suggestion to, in cases of suicide, self-damaging behavior, suicide contagion, suicide terrorism, and you can use these reverse engineer guidelines to stop the power of suggestion, to make the power of suggestion happen. And it's not rocket science. Your basic 101 psych tells you what to do. We know that repetitive content, repetitive reporting, repetitive exposure to ads, that works. We know sensationalist content works. It captures our attention. We know simplistic explanations work. If you can't have your explanation for why they want to buy that, why you need to buy that product really simple, it won't work. Giving how-to information. So the thing to do in suicide terrorism is not report on how to make a suicide belt. But if you want to get people to buy your product, give important how-to information. Provide a rationale. for why people did it. Give an explanation for why they do it. And show it as effective behavior. This is all basic stuff, but they're practical things that you can use to enhance, to get the power of suggestion working for your marketing. And they're rational. It's sometimes behavior, whether it be terrorist behavior, whether it be self-damaging behavior, whether it be suicide, can be rational behavior. People looking for a solution, looking for evidence and working things through. But sometimes it's more emotional. And suggestion works through an emotional mechanism as well, through how we interpret situations. And some of the research I've done on Kurt Cobain from Nirvana, who was found dead in 1994, he sort of blew his brains out. There was this big worry after all this stuff about the power of suggestion and media. The media coverage was going to be huge, and so there was going to be a lot of copycat suicides going on after, given his celebrity status. What's interesting, there wasn't at all. The reason why is because they applied these media guidelines for stopping the power of suggestion. But shortly after he died, there was his suicide note got out onto the internet, which basically explained why he did what he did, provided a rationale for it, highly emotive, and there was the risk then, theoretical risk, that people exposed to the suicide note would increase their likelihood of committing suicide or at least considering suicide. So being a slightly dark psychologist I am, I decided to test this. But not simply looking through it would have been too easy to say, look, if you look at all these media guidelines for how not to report it, this is exactly what his suicide note that was freely available on the internet was saying. So that didn't need to be proved. That was just basic stuff. But I thought how people interpret the meaning of suicide, what's its emotional meaning for people, that really could have an impact if the note primed our minds with our mind, or the people seeing its mind with certain ideas. So I captured the top associations. I don't want to get all Wittgensteinian over you around suicide, but basically if you take a Wittgensteinian understanding of semantics, that the definition of you as an individual is all the associations people make around you. That is, and so this actually, for people, I did quantitatively captured the top semantic associations around suicide by asking people to play the word association test. I then took the negative associations as the wallpaper to see before people saw Kurt's suicide note. I'm taking the negative ones, suffering, pain, anguish, etc., and showed people this first. So I primed their minds with negative meanings, and then allowed them to see the suicide note that they had been exposed to. What was interesting, those people who saw the suicide note unprimed with negative meanings of suicide, negative words, cue words, were unprimed. This on a scale, it's on a Likert scale, a sort of 7-point scale, likelihood that you would consider suicide. The unprimed people who didn't see it negatively were, fortunately enough, just about mean was about 2.5 out of 7 likelihood they commit suicide overall. Those who were primed negatively was less. It seems small, but this is the world actual research. We don't have big, huge differences. I can't say that I'll double your sales or whatever. But it made a significant difference, priming people's minds with negative associations around a key word. So what does that mean for us as marketing? So this is suicide, this is terrorism, this is one weird psychologist you got up in front of you. But in terms of marketing, what this means is that if we understand the desired behavior that you want consumers or your audience to do, if you capture the top positive associations, the associations that define that, and then prime their minds, use those cue words rather than keywords, use cue words that people associate with, they are more likely to do what you want them to do. Your marketing will become more effective. So it's a really simple message that I'll leave you with, is that in order to harness the power of suggestion, you don't need strange hypnotism, you don't need weird and wacky psychology. There are formal practical guidelines. If you look up media guidelines for suicide, terrorism, they're all up there. You can actually apply them, reverse engineer, do them exactly the opposite for your marketing, and then think about capturing, using keywords, the strong positive associations around the desired behavior or category. And that will prime people's minds and make them more likely to do what you want them to do. And that is the essence of good marketing. Thank you very much.
If anyone's brave enough in the midst of that, we have time for a question. And some very scary and interesting reverse engineering.
Hi, I work for a charity, and there's a difficult balance to strike when you're trying to encourage people to donate, where you want to show the need that you're going to try and fulfill and try and help with the money, versus the positive effect of giving that money and then having the positive result. And it's a balance that we constantly struggle with, and I believe all charities struggle with. Have you got any thoughts around that? Whether what you're actually trying to do is get those positive keywords to get people, or do you want those negative keywords to try and emphasise more the need and therefore encourage the action?
I think it's a really interesting question. To give a joined-up answer, I'd have to do a bit of joined-up thinking about it. But off the top of my head, I would ward off. I mean, I'm kind of captain power of suggestion. So I think power of persuasion, trying to argue reasons why, give people reasons why, show them the effects of stuff, show them why they should do it. I think it can lead, it's tough. Trying to persuade people to do anything is a really difficult job. And I think personally, I think the sooner marketers give up on the whole persuasion-based marketing, the better. So what I would be looking to do is, rather than convince people, actually embody somebody doing what you want to do. And so whether it be celebrity endorsement, doing it, actually so the Angelina Jolie stuff, it just works. People will follow through. It's the power of suggestion. So rather than trying to convince somebody to donate, show somebody else donating, showing it being successful, showing them being the behavior being effective, using sensation, using words, and then using the key words in there around people's associations. So I don't know what your charity is, but I would capture the associations around both your category, your top associations around a category that define your category emotionally and semantically for people, and then do the same for the desired behavior. What are the positive, not rational reasons to donate, but the emotional associations? What do people feel when they donate? Those are the questions you should be asking, and then capturing those associations, and then embedding those cue words using the power of suggestion, which is not about arguing, it's about using the power of example. Sorry, off the top of my head, so top level, so apologies, but I hope that makes some kind of sense and is useful.
I think that was a fantastically impressive off the top of the head answer, if ever I heard one. Thank you very much, Paul Marsden.
Thank you.